Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree the Podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com. Our partners over there have got everything you want: international gear, club gear, national team gear, you name it. They got all the stuff for Copa America coming up. They got the goods. If you use the code Third Degree at checkout, both in store and online, just mention it when you check out at the counter or use it at Soccer90.com. You get 20% off. Code Third Degree at Soccer90.com. Third Degree the Podcast is also brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm. For wills, probates, trusts, and business law, call 469-515-2559 or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode 266 of Third Degree, the podcast. It's me, Peter, and here also doing this today is your friend and mine, Dan Crooke. Hello, Dan.
Hello, hello.
And somewhere, I think I'm correct in saying in sunny Florida, is editor, founder, original soccer influencer, all-around good guy of thirddegree.net, Buzz Carrick. Come and buzzed.
Hi, yeah, Peter. I'm definitely in hot Florida, where it's very humid and very wet. Tampa, very specifically.
Sounds like Dallas.
Yeah, no, it's way more humid here than Dallas. This is like Houston.
Yeah. Well, Dallas has been like Houston a lot lately, so the dew point has been over 70 in Dallas a lot lately, and that is very Houston and very Florida. It's not a pretty sight. Well, good. What are you doing in Florida?
Football again, believe it or not. This is the championship of the thing I was doing before.
Is this the 7v7 or flag football thing?
7-man football, yeah, high school football.
Yep. Yeah, all right, cool. This is their summer bit.
Yeah, it's things the players do in the off season. You know, when it's not fall football. This is the tail end of spring football, 7-man football going into summer.
Stars of the NFL future you're just peering upon all the time?
Yeah, these kids are all spectacular 4 or 5-star level recruits. You know, there's lots of guys in the NFL that played in this tournament, you know, within the last 3 or 4 years even.
They're all early teens, and they're all 6'5", 252.
Yeah, there are guys at this thing that are just unbelievable specimens of athleticism. You know, which ones will make it? What do I know? I'm not a football scout, but like some of them are just. I mean, these are the guys that are the top 2 quarterbacks in the whole country are here, and guys that are the top 10 receivers. It's just the real elite guys.
Gee, Buzz, if only some of them would just play soccer.
Right? Yeah, that's funny. There are definitely dudes here that I wish would play soccer, because some of them were like 5'6", 5'8", and just spectacular athletes, and they're never going to make it in football. But they're just so elite athletes that they're good at this, 7-man football.
All right. When are you back from Florida?
Monday.
Okay. Dan, what exotic location do we find you at? Would that be Richard's land? Richard's son?
Sorry, you sharted what?
I don't know. I was trying to say like Target for Target, but it didn't come out the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
You're in Richardson.
I am indeed in Richardson.
Okay. Well, boys, here we are on a new episode of Third Degree, the podcast, facing the reality that Dallas played 2 games since the last time we spoke and lost both of those games and is mired near the bottom of the table. And I don't think we really know anything more than we did this time a week ago, Buzz.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know that we know more. What we know is more rooted in stone. You know, the more time passes, the more we are absolutely aware and know exactly what this team is and what it's good at and what it's terrible at, which is probably a lot of things. This is a weird time when you're around a team that's got a record like this. It's often hard for them to understand why it's happening, because these guys have all been quality players in their whole lives. And they don't understand sometimes why all of a sudden the team they're on is absolutely terrible. Some of these guys played for the biggest clubs in the world. Well, one of them did. And the frustration is across the board. And it can be difficult to watch them because, like when you're around them, you talk to them enough, you get to know them, you feel like you like them, and they're likable people, and you get along with them, and you just hate to see them having to deal with something this bad. you know, and sometimes you get to a certain point that it almost becomes inevitable that it has to be blown up when it's this bad. But I will say that, there are still a lot of signs that these guys are all still buying in and fighting for Nico, so I don't, it is not as bad culturally around the team as 2003 when things went way, way south on Jeffries and everybody knew it and he lost everybody, relatively quickly early in the year, not necessarily through his fault. This isn't like that. This one is where everyone is still rolling in the right direction, as Oscar would say, but it just doesn't work. And I don't know what to do. Certainly, we can do nothing about it except try and analyze it.
Yeah. So as I mentioned last week, I was in LA for both of the games, got to attend both places, got to check off both stadiums off the list of MLS locations I've not been to before. And I don't think I'm going to tell anybody anything unique that they were really bad against the Galaxy and slightly better against LAFC. What I thought was interesting was the vibe and body language of the team between the two games. And in the Galaxy game, when they lined up for the picture, you could tell they knew they had no interest in being there. And it felt a little better in the LAFC game a few days later, which is weird to me. I do wonder how much of that has to do with the tremendous atmosphere inside BMO Stadium, because the atmosphere inside the Galaxy Stadium is, I can't believe I'm saying this, it's weirdly Toyota Stadium-like.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if the fact that my sense is that they were a little bit more revved up for the second game than the first, had something to do with just the tremendous scene that they were playing in, and that beautiful stadium, by the way. Both stadiums are great. We can talk more about that later, but the LAFC thing is certainly a next level.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, too, that there's a recognition that LAFC plays in a way that is slightly favorable towards Dallas. They're not going to try and take the ball away from you and hold it the whole time. They're not going to necessarily ticky-tack you all over the field. They're more athletic and more direct, and they're also willing to not have the ball. So, Dallas is able to get more of their share of the ball, and they begin to feel a little better, and LAFC is not pressing them and making it very, very difficult to play out of the back like the Galaxy did, something that makes Dallas fairly uncomfortable despite the fact that it's what they want to do. Mm-hmm. It's weird that you want to do something that you don't have the players for, which is weird, but it's hard to be a ticky-tacky build-out team if you don't have center backs with great feet. So they obviously felt much better against LAFC. And then again, maybe also being a different place for a week can freshen your mind. You're not coming back to Dallas and coming back to your families and coming back to the grind that's reminding you that it's not going well. It's almost like you're on an extended, well, this is different. I'm not going to call it a vacation, but maybe your brain turns a little bit and you begin to feel decently about things and feel a little better about yourself for some reason, just having that freshness to it all. I mean, there were pictures of them training in a different location. Even the pictures felt weird looking at Dallas guys in training gear in a place that clearly wasn't Toyota Soccer Center. So, maybe that all fed into it, perhaps.
Well, the weather was spectacular. I can tell you that. Hey, Dan, I don't know if I know where you sit on this particular topic, so I'm going to ask you. Where are you on the Nico out, Nico in question?
Ooh. Sonata out, Andre out. I mean, you can change the coach as many times as you want, right? But if the guy getting the players in isn't delivering, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm very similar minded to you on this, and getting to watch the team was interesting. I got to sit in a really unusual place for the LAFC game, and it's a very long story how this ended up happening. It had nothing to do with me and everything to do with a friend of ours that has connections. But inside BMO Stadium, they have seats that are literally on the field. There's 3 rows of them, and they're on either side of each bench. So you literally walk out to these seats from the same place the players walk out onto the field from. And so I was 5 feet away from the team, and at most 15 feet away from Nico for most of the day. And watching him from that perspective was really, really interesting. And he clearly is engaged, and he certainly hasn't given up. And the players seem to click with him, but more than I think you can tell from the stands, at least in this particular game. And in the days after the game, there was a lot of discussion on Buzz's Discord about how everybody wants him fired and canned, and that just feels like the most obvious thing to do. And there's a big part of me, Buzz, that thinks, yeah, okay, but do you got a plan? I feel it feels like everybody just wants a pound of flesh, and they want it from somebody, and he seems like the easiest guy to take it from.
He's the easiest guy to change, for sure. It's a lot harder. Yeah.
But nothing's going to change if you just because you put. I mean, unless you go out and hire Bruce Arena.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And they're not going to do that.
Yeah. No. They're not getting Bruce Arena. The discussion of whether this job is a job anyone will take is a different discussion. It's related to the amount it pays and the fact that you have to answer to Zanata, and Dan Hunt and Clark Hunt. So that's a totally different question. But the question is like, if you need a change and you want to change, the fastest, easiest thing to change is the head coach, because changing the roster takes a whole bunch of moves and lots of time and maybe even multiple seasons. Changing the TD is just about as difficult. It's a lot harder to change the TD than it is to change the coach, because the coach only deals with, a lot of times, pretty much just the first team. You just walk out to the training ground with a new coach and you go. Whereas like a new TD, you have to be completely integrated into the entire scouting system, completely integrated with, all your connections around the country that are going to make you be able to find and get all these players. It is not nearly as easy. So it's like, this is what always happens in all kinds of professional leagues. I can't change the whole roster. Might as well change the coach. So I think people definitely have negative responses to some of what I think are some mistakes that this coach is making. He's not making massive amounts of mistakes, but he's definitely making it harder for himself. But I come back to the idea that, like, from everything I hear and everything I see with my eyes, his team hasn't given up on him, and they're still fighting for him. They're given what they're capable of giving. Now, would a new coach improve them? It's certainly possible. It's certainly possible that a new coach would change the system. Maybe he would try some guys in different spots. Maybe he would try a different tactic. Maybe all those things could make the team better. But all those things, I think, would only make the team a few places better. You could maybe get it up to like the fringe of the playoffs, but like you're not going to turn it into the first place team in the league, in 5 games. I don't think with just a new coach. You get a little bit of a coach bounce, probably. Mm-hmm. But maybe what you might get that would appease people would be an offensive team that is going to attack and score some goals. Maybe you might not win, but it might be more entertaining. And so maybe people want that, or maybe just like when you're upset enough, you just want change to have change. And, you don't want to go through the rest of this year with a guy that you don't think is good enough as a coach or as a lame duck as a coach, and then you're going to be getting players for a coach you don't want. As the fans, I mean, not the ownership. They clearly at this point are on board with him, or they would have done something by now, I think. So I understand people's frustrations. I understand why they want to get rid of the coach, but it would not be overnight success. Even if you got Bradley or, Jesse Marsh or whatever you think the best American coach available is, Bruce Arena, it's not going to go great overnight. And again, you're not going to get one of those guys here in Dallas. You're going to get, a guy that's got a connection to the club, or a guy that's looking for a first-time job, or a guy that has a connection to the Hunts. You can just look at their litany of promoting assistants from their previous staff, and or getting a guy that they knew really well. Nico Gonzalez is one of the very, very rare exceptions, or the only exception really, when they've gone outside that system.
It is frustrating because while I was watching the Galaxy game, there was a moment where I was just like, okay, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And maybe you can explain it to me. Somebody else on Twitter tried to. And tried to make sense of it and argue that it was the right move. But when Tafari gets his second yellow and is ejected, Nico's decision being down a goal with about 7 minutes left in regulation and whatever added time was going to come, which was a total of about, I think it ended up being about 10, 12 minutes total. He takes off Patrickson, and instead of putting on an attacking player, he puts on a center back.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the stands aghast, trying to figure out why in the world, why don't you put on Farrington or somebody else that can go forward with the ball? And somebody who appears to have some tactical understanding tried to explain it to me on Twitter about some sort of weird rotation with Jesus. I don't know. All I know is that the vibe of the team was very, very defensive, and it needed an injection of energy, an attacking verve, not more padding, and that's all that Omar gave the team.
Well, my assumption is at the time when it happened, my assumption was that you need to keep, you're going to be down a man, you need to keep some sort of defensive shape, and this coach in particular is going to feel that way. So he's going to bring in a guy that will keep that cohesion together and keep the defensive rigidity together, because you're going to have to go, a fair amount of the play there at that point and try and salvage something. You can't do it if you only have 2 center backs now in a 3 center back system, and there's basically just a track meet right through the middle of your team.
Why don't you go to 2 center backs and 2 full backs and just play with 4 in the back?
Well, you certainly could do that, but
go to a 4-4-1 and throw Farrington on there.
Well, you and I might do that, but this coach doesn't think that way.
Right, and that's kind of that's kind of my point, and that's why I think everybody's frustrated with him, and I don't get it. And you'd have to think that he knows that people are frustrated with this kind of. Both of these games is this continuation of this thing where of 10 field players on the field, essentially 8 of them are defenders.
Yeah, but that's his thing, right? That's what we've talked about, is that he wants that defensive first responsibility by every player across the field. He wants to be able to play full field team defense against everybody. And this, for him, that's the margin between, trying to make a team that's less talented compete against a team that's more talented, is by having defensive responsibility everywhere. And that's what he wants. And it can be really boring to watch a 5-4-1, or a 5-3-1 or whatever that turned into after you got red carded. But then you turn around a week later and he talks about the game being the best cohesive end-to-end 2-directional performance of the entire season.
The Galaxy game?
No, the LAFC game.
Oh.
A week later. No, 3 days later. He commented after the game that's the LAFC game was the single best performance, offensive and defensive, of the whole year.
Well, it was after he took Emma off and put on Allen.
Put on Paul, you mean?
Paul, yeah.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I thought Ema actually played really well. He went off because of his knee pain he was having. But Paul,
man, Buzz, you and I got to talk about that, because I will tell you, sitting literally on the sideline next to Emma was the most frustrating exercise of watching a guy refuse to take space and attack. And I don't know, and by watching his body language and watching his communication with his coach, I'm telling you, I don't think it's an instruction. I just don't think he thinks he can do it safely, so he refuses to do it.
Yeah, maybe so. I think, I joke that it's been coached out of him. But
maybe that's it, too.
You're right that Paul immediately brought the offensive capability we were talking about the wingbacks needing on both sides. And neither Marco Farfan or Ema has been doing enough, and Paul immediately brought that. Then, of course, Paul made a breakdown on the goal, but he wasn't the only one, but it was part of a breakdown on the goal. So, and that immediately would make the coach go, see, I knew I needed a defender over there. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So, sometimes these things that get us excited feed back in a loop to the coach of like, see, I knew I should have a defender. But I will grant you that, and this is something I think is really important, the lack of offensive width from the wingbacks is one of the things that's absolutely killing this team offensively, because if you don't have, because the way they're playing this formation with the underneath 10s, your width has to come from your wingbacks, and if you don't have it, then your defense of the other team is able to pinch down and play more narrow and put the 10s and the 9 in a box and make it very difficult to score. And that's exactly what happens to this team over and over again. It's the failure of the offense from the wingbacks, which is probably why he played Dante Sealy as long as he did, except that eventually he just couldn't stand the defensive mistakes. And that's why Ema starts all the time, because, frankly, Ema's the best defensive outside back wingback he has. Best defensive one.
Yeah.
And that's why he plays him. So, and that's the thing about, like, if we look forward to Giovanni coming back, Giovanni's a better offensive wing back than Nima will be, but Nima's a better defender. So don't assume necessarily with this coach that Giovanni's going to walk back in and become the answer. It's got to have to be balanced.
Well, I want to go back to the LA game because the thing that was just so obvious to me in the difference between the two teams, because I will tell you, LA was there for the taking. They did not play that well. They repeatedly turned the ball over. Edgar in particular, Edgar had some just awful turnovers in the midfield. It was almost as if he forgot he was not supposed to pass to his old friends from high school sometimes. But the player that clearly stood out was Puig. I mean, that kid is, by the way, he is an absolute tiny dude. I can't even begin to tell. Like, if you think Paul Arriola is tiny, Puig is like a skinnier, tinier version of Paul Arriola.
Yeah.
In real life.
Right.
And he does this weird thing where he pulls his shorts up and they look like diapers. But his first touch and his willingness to take space and drive at a defense from the center of the field is exactly the kind of player Dallas is just dying for. And to be fair, probably many teams in MLS.
Well,
he's obviously a next-level player, but just he has that skill set and that willingness to try things and do it, even when he isn't successful all the time. He just never stops trying to do it, and that was clearly a massive thing Dallas is missing.
Yeah, and I even wonder if Alan Velasco was healthy, if he would be that guy.
No, because we watched Alan not go at defenders successfully for a year and a half.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one. This is where I think you can't undersell the missing Paxton Pomacall, as well, because of the fact that, he had so many of these box-to-box sort of linking eight metrics that are missing from this team right now. The ability to connect and the ability to link through is such a massive thing. But it also comes back to the idea that this formation that they're playing, it leaves you with, across the midfield, not a lot of ball possession kind of players, because wingbacks aren't necessarily like nifty dribbling possession kind of players. They aren't necessarily line breaking kind of players. And so you put a lot of weight on your two guys in the middle, which should have been Aramini and Paxton, and it isn't. Because either Armini's out because he's old or Paxton's out because he's out for the year. So it's like, it's not a simple question that can be answered just by one guy by itself being the difference. Jesus has been out. They're really the other person trying to be Allen has been nothing compared to what Allen can do in that position. Mm-hmm. It's tough.
What is it you think the coach sees in Delgado playing that more forward position? Because I got a lot of hot sports opinions about that.
Well, he's not a string pulling 10. He's one of these box crashing 10s. Like, he and Jesus actually have a lot of common qualities in terms of their ability to come in late into the box and put touches and passes and pieces together in the box and make dangerous moments in the box. So I think he sees a player like that because the guys he's trying in that spot aren't producing, and Delgado at least has 3 goals in 3 games. He was as hot as anybody, so I'm sure he was riding him for that reason, really.
But why not Leggett?
Well, other than him being hurt, yeah, that's a good question. Well, there's a point at which I think you stick with the hot hand. If you're preaching to people that we have to be better offensively, that we have to score goals, that we have to get some offensive results, and then you put a kid in there and he proceeds to score goals 2-3 games in a row, you got to ride that. You got to, if he does what you're saying needs to have happen, then you got to keep going with him. Now, I think long run, certainly at their current level of ability, I think Leggett probably is a better answer there in the long term, but I don't have a problem with riding Delgado as long as he was playing really well.
Well, one of the things in one of your burns that you put out, I think it was last week, was that you had discovered from the coach that I think we may have even talked about this in the podcast, which is that he's a 10.
Yeah, I thought he was a 6.
Did we talk about this in the podcast, or did I hear that in one of your burns?
I did a burn on it because I was so flabbergasted I did a burn on it.
Okay.
The thing is that I assumed that Delgado was a 6. And I use the word assume because I did assume. I assumed that the metrics that I was seeing online from his time at Ajax, Ajax's second team, were correct because Ajax played him as a 6 more, a little bit as an 8. They put him in that position. So I just kind of went with that idea, particularly because when he played with Dallas in practice, And when he played with him in games, he always came in that double pivot next to Yarmindy or next to Frazier all the time. And then every once in a while in training, I would see him fielded as an 8 if they were redoing a 4-3-3, and once in a blue moon, he would pop up as that high 10. So I just kind of went with that. I went with the idea that he was a 6. And then when I was asking Coach, because after a couple of games, I thought, okay, what is it you saw in him that you're putting him as this 10 player, a guy that nominally is a 6 you're using? There must have been some quality of him you thought would work. And he said, well, that's because he is a 10. He's not a 6. His whole career has been as a 10. And I was like, I cannot. So as much perhaps my fault or any media's fault for assuming that where his last team played him was the thing, we obviously get way more information out of Europe than we get out of South America. I had no idea he was a 10. Also, no one at the team apparently knew because none of the social media people have been saying, oh, he's a 10. The only person that knew he was a 10 was Coach. And he never said anything. So,
well, he's not a very 10.
Well, he's not a string pulling 10. He's this modern box crashing free 8 whatever. Is Jesus a 10? Because Delgado's more like Jesus than he is like Alan Velasco. So if you think Jesus is a 10, then Delgado's a 10.
No, well, it was really aggravating because I would watch him get the ball wide and somebody make a really smart run behind the defense, and he would actually look at the player making the run and then refuse to make the pass. It was almost as if he didn't know how to do it. It was weird, Buzz. And I saw that in both of these games, and I think it's a big part of the problem with the attack is that he's just not that kind of attack-minded player.
Well, Coach mentioned that that Delgado had sort of lost faith in his own sort of a ball-on-ball ability, and one of the reasons why Ajax had played him so deep was because they thought he'd be better back there like that. And then Coach said that one of the reasons that they, AFC Dallas, were able to get him was because of this sort of lost feeling of and that he said that
because he's not very good. That's why they were able to get
what Coach said was he said we're a club that will bring through youth players and develop them and make them better. He said that's why we were able to get him. That's why he came here. And he said there were some clubs in Europe that really wanted him and were mad that he chose to come to Dallas instead. So, now we talked before about this. Coach doesn't like kids, but he does like these 20-year-olds like Delgado and like Bernard Camungo. So he doesn't mind guys that are 18, 19, 20, 21. What he doesn't like is 15-year-olds. So, I'm not saying that you have to agree with all the things this coach is saying, but I think you can understand what Coach is talking about and what's coming from and why he's not trying to use them at this high spot. In the long run, this season, I'm not sure he's the answer, but I'm totally fine riding that hot hand, and I'm I think eventually you'll see Leggett move back in there, but. And of course,
it's frustrating because he has scored a few goals and they've been kind of goals of opportunity versus goals of creation. Yep. But the rest of the game is just a maddening exercise in a guy that just looks out of place. But I say that with the agreement that I can see why an Ajax moved him back further in the field because he is rangy, he works hard, and he keeps his head up, and he does have a little bit of skill set. It's just not in the attacking half of the field. And so I think I understand why Nico is staying with it, but it's not working well enough to help the team overall.
Well, you say that, but he led the team by a fair amount in progressive receptions, which means the team does play through him against LAFC. And he has the second most offensive final third touches, and he had more touches in the penalty box than Jesus did. Jesus had none, and he had 2. So you're right. He is optimistic, and he bounces forwards, and he gets.
Jesus is a completely different story.
Sure. Well, in the context of this team full of dudes,
yes,
he's Delgado's. I'm fine with Delgado. Is he Puig? No, let's not be insane. But he's outplaying everybody else they've put in that spot. He's outplaying.
Yeah,
and that includes that
may say more about the rest of the roster.
Of course
than
it does, but context
Delgado.
matters. I'm not saying he's the answer. I'm just saying that. Dan, how do you like him in that spot?
Is as good as any other option right now. I mean, tenacious, not the most organized, but scoring.
Okay. The other thing, one of the other things I wanted to talk about as just as observation is I want to talk about Musa a little bit. How many games into the season are we now?
We're almost halfway.
Halfway.
15, yeah.
Where Dan? Where is Musa for you on so far? Has he lived up to expectations? Is he about where you thought he'd be? Is he?
Ooh, expect and hope are very different things when it comes to FC Dallas, aren't they?
Yeah, fair.
He's definitely not getting the level of service that any striker needs. I don't think he shows a lot of frustration. Those moments where he switches off on defensive duties or just kind of blasts a shot from distance out of frustration. That could be a little bit better, but give him good service in a good position, and he does score.
Buzz, where are you on him?
I actually really like him. I think he's got a mentality of someone that competes and keeps competing for the whole game. I'm with Dan that if he had a higher volume of service, he's leading this team with 5 goals, which is not I think it's 5, not a really high level, of course, compared to the rest of the league. But I think relative to the amount of chances he's getting, it's pretty good. I don't have any real complaints. I mean, I don't think he's the reason this offense doesn't work. I know that you're going to talk a bit about his body language, and I actually asked Coach about that because he's super demonstratively bummed, in the way he carries himself, and he gestures to the sky, if you will, a fair bit. And Coach said he actually talked to him about that, and Musa had said to him that he knows he's like that. He said, but it's just his way of getting out emotion, and I can respect that because I don't see him then quit and walking around. I see him making runs late in games that other guys don't make. And maybe up close it's tough, but we already have Jesus, who already is overly demonstrably negative anyway, so I'm not sure that it's not all just feeding off each other at some point.
Yeah, my sense in watching him in the 2 games was interesting because there are clear moments where he is a very class player, and I don't doubt that there is a top-notch guy in there. And he clearly is frustrated by what he's gotten himself into by coming here. But I do think just in some fundamentals, there are some indicators of some of this is his fault because he is having a hard time doing something with the ball when the team does provide him service. I mean, there are multiple times, if you just go back and watch the game, anytime somebody plays a ball up to him long that he has to trap with his chest while he's got a defender on his back, that is almost more times than not a ball he's going to lose. And he gets very frustrated by that.
I would say that's my number one critique of him is that balls into him, he's not retaining at a high enough level. Some of that is the quality of the ball, of course, but some of that also is on him. Again, some of that is because, as I talked about, since there's no wide attack, the defense is collapsing and he's getting less space than he should. All that's a factor, but the bottom line is that you're 100% correct that he's turning those passes into him over at a higher clip than he should be. That's clearly a thing that needs to be better on his
game. And when it happens, he turns off and he doesn't fight for it. He understands that he's lost the ball. And I saw this a lot in both the games, especially in the LFC game where he really got frustrated in the first half. But what was interesting is that he sparked to life when the Paul Arriola substitution was made and the team started playing better. He started playing better. And so I think all of this is somehow connected, not somehow, obviously connected to just the general poor form of the team. And I think it's really rubbing off on him.
Well, loop that in, if you will, again, to this lack of the outside attack from the wingbacks. The minute you put Paul on, he's attacking that outside space. The defense opens up, creates space. Paul actually beats a man or two, gets a ball in that might not have been coming in before. And all of a sudden, Musa has a tiny bit more space to operate, and he livens up and recognizes things are happening. Again, to me, the number one problem with this offense is not Jesus or Musa or the other 10 spot or whatever. It's the lack of wide play that's allowing defenses to collapse. The lack of offense from your wingbacks is just absolutely destroying this team.
Well, in terms of Jesus, I think what we've come to learn about Jesus in the last year or so is that I think we all thought Jesus was a guy who was capable of grabbing a game by the scruff of its neck and kind of bossing it. And I think what we've come to learn is that Jesus really is going to be the type of player is dependent on other parts to really become a game changer. He's just not going to be able to do it by himself.
Yeah, he's not a guy that can dribble through a bunch of people. He's a guy that plays best in combination with people, takes advantage of mistakes, takes advantage of chaos in the box. He's not going to be able to carry the ball up there by himself. Now, he is a good line breaker. He will come back and create combinations and break lines, and his movement can be really decisive. But, again, it's a team game.
Yeah.
Dallas doesn't have a Puig, and really who else does other than Messi,
Right.
You're talking about some of the true elites that have these guys that can single-handedly take a team and win a game. Nashville had a guy like that in Mukhtar, but even he has fallen off this year. Cincinnati has one, and Luciano Costa, and their striker's name is slipping my brain right this minute. The really great teams have these guys. Even LAFC right now maybe really doesn't have one of those guys in terms of the midfield. They have a guy up top that's like that, but even he needs help. He's more like Jesus. Buaga is, he's not like Messi or Puig that's going to dribble through three guys and score.
No, he just looks like, just in seeing him in person for the first time, that's just a dude that's just going, he bosses games just through pure physicality more than anything else. Although he's not as big as I thought he was going to be, which is weird. I thought he was.
No, but he has a presence,
yeah.
though.
Oh, boy. Yeah, he definitely has a presence. No doubt about that. The other thing, the Tafari second yellow in real time, I thought he got the ball cleanly, and it just was a ref reacting to a guy flipping over heels over head. But I guess Dan, it was a legitimately good yellow card to give, and a second one at that.
Oh yeah, he deserved both of them.
Okay, I never saw a replay of it. Like I said, I just saw it in real time. Why was he fined for not leaving the field? Because my recollection of that was that he hung out for like 10, 15 seconds waiting to see if maybe it would be VAR'd, but obviously it wouldn't because it wasn't a red, and he turned right around and walked off.
You can't wait to see if it's going to be VAR'd. You have to start walking. You remember, I think it was earlier this year, I want to say Paul got a red card, and he just immediately turned around and walked to the locker room, and he was halfway up the tunnel before the decision to go to VAR came. So then he stopped and waited, but he was already at the tunnel. And then when it got overturned, then they waved him back. And that's what you have to do. You have to start to go and then let them call you back. If you wait at all, you're going to get fined. And 5 guys got fined for that last week. It's happening everywhere. It's not just Tafari.
The league needs to do better, or pro. It's every week the disciplinary committee decisions, emails that go out. There's rarely anything actually related to foul play or violent conduct. It's all got sent off, took too long. It's bullshit.
Well, people aren't getting the message clearly, but they just keep finding everybody.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're not giving the message.
Yeah.
Fair. If someone just handed you a ticket, while you're out driving for a $5,000 fine, but didn't tell you why you got it, you're going to keep doing the same thing.
The reason why I asked the question was obviously the replacement was Omar, which was, and Omar was surprisingly good in the LAFC game. But there was one, and I would say Omar was good, and so was Alara Mendy, who continues to be really, really good.
It's just unbelievable.
But the one thing those two guys have very much in common is they both have the speed of a 35-year-old soccer player. They are both.
Yeah, they do.
And when you're playing a team the number of times Puig just ran right by Alara Mendy. And there were a couple times where Alara got the better of Puig, but especially on that last goal for LA, where he just kind of ran right past him and he could not get anywhere close to him. And that was a very similar thing with Omar, the through ball, Omar trying to chase that guy down. That's another big problem with the team.
Oh, that was such a perfectly weighted pass. But
It was.
Yeah. Obviously Omar does not have the quicks anymore, and neither does Iermini, but Iermini reads the game so well, it's usually not an issue. The problem on that particular goal where against LAFC was that Frazier got pulled out of position because basically they have Sanchez, their sixth, who's a really good passer. He was sitting deep and should be bracketed by the 210s, but both of those guys, which was Jesus and Leggett at the time, did not chase back and cover. So Frazier looks at him, points at him, and then says, well, screw it. And he runs 20 yards up the field and leaves a giant gaping gap that LA then proceeded to pass the ball right through. And he's trying to catch the guy, and it's too late at that point. And then that guy makes because he has all the space in the world to run into, then makes a beautiful lead pass for Boaga, and it's just fucking such a beautiful goal. It really is well taken across the board by them, but the space that was created was just a massive chasm for them to play through, starting with Frazier overreaching because somebody else wasn't doing their job defensively.
Well, obviously, the one player that stood out in both of these games and continues to be the best player of the season, which is never a good sign for a club, is Maarten Paes in goal. And by the way, in person, that double save on the PK in real time, in person, was otherworldly stuff. And the praise he got from the Galaxy fans that were around me, they were all like, why can't we get this guy? This guy's amazing. They were all really impressed. Like, you could tell nobody knew who he was. They don't know where he's from. They don't know his story. But he won so many people over on Wednesday night at whatever Dignity Stadium, whatever they call that place now.
Yeah, he had a MLS career high 9 saves against LAFC, which is funny. Like Coach talked about it being the best front 2-end performance, and I'm like, dude, your keeper set a career high in saves. Now I grant you that if you're into these things, their XG was just a little over the one goal they scored, like 1.3, 1.4, depending on who you looked at. So, Maarten Paes in that sense was only good for about half of a goal, but when you have 9 saves out of your keeper, it's like that means 9 balls would have gone to the net if he hadn't saved him. And some of those saves were not saves that every keeper makes.
I would say
he was phenomenal again.
I would say the harder saves came in the Galaxy game than the LAFC game. A lot of the LAFC shots were right at him or relatively not difficult. The Galaxy game he made, beyond the double save on the PK, there were a couple of other ones where he was flying all over the place. But look, it was an amazing 5 days for that guy.
He was easily pickable as the man of the match in both games. He was phenomenal in both games, and yet they're getting spanked in one game and losing the other game. And he's being incredible on top of that.
And here on the Red Crayon Run Sheet, I have this entry submitted: the Sam Junqua quandary.
Yeah, this is I don't know if it's a quandary for this team. It's a quandary for me because Sam Junqua is clearly the best crosser on this team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. When he does take his moments and gets forward, he hits beautiful balls into the box, into dangerous spots. On top of that, I'm very convinced, the best two-way balanced wingback on this team, both offensive and defensive. If you could play him at left wing back in particular, you get a crossing angle. You can also play him at right wing back because he likes to play what we would call an inverted wing back, which is where if you have him on that side, for example, you could play Bernie Kamungo as one of the 10s on the right side, and Bernie could then play as a more traditional wing and take up those outside spaces because Sam relishes playing switch foot outside back where he can come underneath and basically become an 8 as he comes forward and fill in that spot, become that 10 underneath player. So you have 3 or 4 ways you could be using Sam Junqua that would benefit this team in multiple phases of their offensive problem, and yet you're forced to play him as center back because he's the best left center back you have and one of the best 3 center backs you have. Hence the Sam Junqua quandary. It might be a whole lot better for this team if you didn't have to use him at center back, but you do. And that's not great.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, between that and the mess in the midfield with the center mids, and I mean, it's just I feel like we're just saying the same thing after episode after episode.
But we can analyze it too, though. But because the center mids right now are in danger of burnout because Yarmini's having to go 90 minutes. Junqua's Liam Fraser's coming off of an injury and having to go 90 minutes and looks burnt out and tired. It's like you're going to run those guys into the ground if they don't find somebody else who can play center mid. Paxton's gone. There's none of the kids that they think are ready. Delgado right now is playing high. He obviously thinks he should be high and not deep, but even though he's had to use him there from time to time. He obviously doesn't have the belief in Norris. So he's got a problem there. He's going to burn him up. He's 34. So, this season could easily – the team's as healthy as it's ever been this season, but it could easily get in big trouble again if they don't figure out some of these other people to play some of these roles.
And is the Norris issue just a function of trust?
Well, it's the yellow cards, I think. He keeps getting these yellow cards. It's just a question of him not being 100% up to speed yet at this level. He's still a tiny bit off the mental speed of the game. And I'm fully confident he'll get there eventually because I really believe this is a very talented player, but he's just not there yet. A year ago he was coming out of the academy. He just needs a little time. That's all. I'm not worried about him. Some of it may be, this coach's belief in he can't afford to have guys that'll make a mistake, and Nolan still will occasionally make a mistake, usually because of his split-second late read on something at this level. It's the same reason why people will say, why isn't Farrington playing? It's the same thing. Farrington is a split-second off the game read at this point, and that's why he's not getting in there as much as you might like him to.
Right. Well, interesting. My book report on my trip is that going to the Galaxy Stadium was really weird because it is far more like Toyota Stadium than I was prepared for. In the way that it's sunken into the ground. You don't see it until you're right on top of it. And the atmosphere in terms of the parking lot scene and in the game is way more like a scene at Toyota Stadium than the LAFC scene, which I'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, having been there myself, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
very similar to Toyota.
Yeah, it's an older stadium, but it's done really nicely. They've added a giant kind of I don't know what end of the field it is, but behind the field, I guess they've expanded it and they've put this giant kind of beer patio out there. That's pretty cool. And the other observation I had from both of the games is the amount of people out in the parking lots vending rip-off jerseys. It's a stunning number of people, and they are just openly and freely operating without any recourse or oversight or anything. And they are selling a wide range of what appears to be a very high-level, top-notch set of knockoff jerseys, scarves, and other accoutrements.
Oh, so it's like when Mexico's at AT&T Stadium in Arlington.
Yes.
And there's thousands of guys out there selling knockoff Mexico jerseys.
It's just like that. Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty crazy. LAFC Stadium is a wonder to behold. It's cool to drive up on. It's next to the Coliseum. It's really nice. It's more open on the inside than I was anticipating, meaning it has an element of Austin's stadium to it in the way that they've left it open in areas to let air run through.
I know what you mean.
That's really cool. But unlike the Austin stadium, it just reeks of thoughtfulness in its layout in terms of the accoutrements and features and all that stuff. And because I think they were obviously prepared for Hollywood elites to be there, even in the VIP section underneath the stadium, there's like a VIP section inside the VIP section. It's pretty crazy.
Some fourth wall break inside a fourth wall break.
Yeah, it's yeah. So if you're in the VIP section, there is an open bar, free beer, free food, free candy, free snacks, as much as you want, all down there. And inside that, there's another glass room with curtains around it that I assume is where Will Ferrell and Taylor Swift and whoever hang out inside of. It's pretty great.
The thing I like about that stadium is I'm gonna call it like the most recent era of MLS stadiums, and I think we have to give Minnesota credit for this with their wonder wall, and that's the steep supporter section behind the goal. Austin has it too. LAFC certainly has it. I think the Minnesota wonder wall may be the first one. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I really love those. Dallas does not have that. Neither does the Galaxy, for example. It's that very vertical-ish behind the goal, safe standing, where it's like they're almost leaning over the field, it feels like, That's super cool.
Yeah, it is. And the atmosphere in that stadium, in my opinion, is second only to Portland. That supporters group is quite good and consistent, nice. And they run the entire game. It's quite a scene, man. It's a really good thing they got going on there, and you can see why they've been very successful, because they've invested a epic fuck ton of money into it, and it has paid off in spades. So Dallas lose both games on the road, and they've got a third game on the road in store for them, facing off against third place Minnesota. Yep, they got to travel up to the hinterlands. Now, Minnesota has given up some results at home. They're 4-1-3, so it's not like either of the LA teams that are undefeated at home and continue to be after Dallas's visit. But Minnesota is going to be a tough one, Buzz, especially. Is Tafari back, or is it just a one-game suspension?
Yeah, it's just a one game. Well, Minnesota was going to be a tough one. I'm not sure it is anymore. They're missing 11 players with call-ups. So, like, the bulk of their starting lineup is gone. And a couple of really key guys off the bench are gone.
Okay. So let me pose this question.
Yeah.
Because I was hoping you were going to bring this up. If Dallas can't beat Minnesota's B team, albeit in Minnesota, that is, I mean, here's the thing, Buzz. I mean, that is going to be a bad look for the entire organization, not just Nico.
Yeah, it's not going to be good. I mean, they're missing, Lod's having an amazing season for them. They're going to be missing Pookie. They'll be missing their starting keeper, their two center backs, a fullback, a midfielder, and a forward. And a couple of guys that are occasional starters are big time off the bench. So, it's up to I think it's 11 last time I counted. And that's not including who they have hurt. I didn't even look at their injury list. That's just the guys that are missing on call-ups, I think. So, Minnesota is as decimated as possible to be when you play in a window and they lose all these players. So, will some of them have come back? Will they have injuries recover? It's hard to say, but you're right. The problem is, of course, it's on the road, and it's very, very difficult on the road. But this is as good a chance to win a road game. This was going to be another monster, horrible game in the middle of this awful, awful 3-game road stretch. Well, this game just all of a sudden got a lot easier, and you now have to go in there thinking this is a chance to get some points on the road. And if they lose this one, that'll be a pretty heavy blow. Pretty heavy blow.
Well, we'll see.
This is the kind of loss that might actually get players to start looking at each other and looking at the coach. If they lose bad to this team, missing the pieces they're missing,
I would like to hear them say they'd look at themselves and each other, but I guess it doesn't work out that way.
Oh, they might look at themselves. I think earlier in the podcast, Peter, you hit on the key question: is do you continue to use Delgado in that high spot, or do you let Lletget come in at this point with a week of training? So that'll be some interesting questions in those particular 4 spots. I mean, I think everybody else is pretty much a lock. Ema maybe versus Paul at outside back, maybe, but then Paul made that one mistake, but then Ema might have this knee knock. So, otherwise it's pretty straightforward. I think Tafari would come right back in. I can't imagine that, even though he played decently, I still think there's a case to be made to say start Omar and let Nkosi play left center back, and then you can use Sam somewhere else. But I don't know that this coach wants to use Sam somewhere else.
Right.
Those are ideas I have. Those are not ideas that he may be having. So,
yeah.
I think anybody out there at this point can pick the team other than that discussion of Delgado versus Lletget versus Frazier look tired, those kinds of things in the midfield. That's the questions.
Well, to change topic, something else I wanted to bring up that was discussed in your Discord, which, by the way, here's my regular break from normal programming to promote the idea that people should subscribe to Buzz's Patreon so they can get access to the Discord. We'd love some new blood in there. Is this discussion we had, somebody was putting up the ESPN top 100 list, or I guess it was a top 200 list or something. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, is there anybody on Dallas's roster It's certainly not top 100 player in the world. Certainly not top 200 player in the world. And suddenly it dawned on me, is there even a player on the Dallas roster that would make a top 1,000 in the world? And I began to do the math. If the average roster in top 5 leagues in Europe are 25, well, the average league has 20 teams, so that's 600. So you could see very quickly, even if you were to decide you were just going to look at the top quarter of each of those leagues, I got to tell you, I don't know if Dallas has a top 1,000 player on it.
Well, the candidates for that discussion are I think he could, with the way Maarten Paes is playing, I think he could play on a top 5 league in Europe. Paes could, I think.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying.
But top 1,000,
sure.
but top 1,000. Just because you're in one of the top 5 leagues doesn't mean you're a top 1,000 player.
No, but he's been at some pretty decent clubs. I'm not trying to convince you this is for sure. I'm just saying these are the 3 people I see as that you could have a discussion and maybe they could be in there. And I think Paes could play at a higher level than he's playing right now. I think he could play at a bigger club than he's at.
Yeah,
I think he's good enough for that. Yeah, obviously in his past, A.R. Mendy was in that list. I mean, he played for massive clubs in Real Madrid and such.
Oh, 5 years ago, he probably was a top 1,000 player. I'm not sure at the age of 34 he is now.
No, and I think not Jesus now. Jesus 2 years ago, 18 goals Jesus. I think that Jesus is capable of playing for a club at that level. I don't think he is right now, but I think he was then.
Yeah.
So, he's fallen off clearly through injury or whatever reason. But I think I think we disparaged that particular season and his form in that season. He started a World Cup game. For whatever reason, that still is a monumental achievement. And that still is when you're playing at that kind of capability, and people were looking at him, and clubs are coming in and offering big money like that. I think back then, he probably was in that level of discussion, if he may or may not actually have been in that particular level. So he never obviously got to it. Yeah. Because he didn't continue it and he didn't go. So
I am seeing a note that Dan has left us.
Yeah, I don't know if he fell out or what, but if he comes back, we'll
Okay. I was going to ask him if he thought, all right. Well, anyway, I'm not trying to pick on Dallas with this hypothetical, because I'm not sure there are that many top 1,000 players in MLS in total, to be honest with you. It just seemed like an extremely large number, and it's like when you realize what your place in the universe kind of thinking. You see all the stars, and you realize each star is a galaxy with 1,000 planets or whatever, and you're like, wow, I'm nothing in this world and in this universe, and that kind of is the thinking behind that particular deal. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, Buzz, was the stadium topic, which is the Dallas Morning News published an article earlier last week stating that it appears that the whatever announcement, in fact, the article came out the day after we had this conversation in the last episode.
Right? That's funny.
And it was really weird because the article said some things or laid some hints that make me wonder if we're about to get a much bigger project at Toyota Stadium than I think we have discussed here. Now, previously, what we've discussed here is the idea of them essentially tearing down the north and east sides of the stadium like they did the south side. But what really has me curious, Buzz, is 2 elements to the Dallas Morning News story. And again, this hasn't been confirmed anywhere. This is just what was reported by the Morning News. First, the amount of money that is being planned on being spent, $158 million.
Right.
Well, the stadium, the entire stadium and the south end construction didn't equal $58 million. Right. The other one, and this is the one that really has my red flag going off, is it says that all of this work won't be done until the end of 2027. And so if they're going to start working on that now in 2023, that's 4 years. That's longer than it took to build the entire stadium, Buzz.
Right. Well, there's lots of things there to answer. The first one is that we've been saying $150 million all along. That's been the number that I've been getting So that's obviously basically the same as your 158 million says right there.
Maybe I forgot that you have said $150 million because that, or it just went through in one ear and out the other.
Right. And then what I was originally saying before was I had said that the east side and the north side were going to be torn down first, and that eventually they were going to get to the west side, right? So I've been talking about the whole thing being torn down except for the Hall of Fame the whole time. That's always been the plan. What has changed very recently is the order in which they're going to do them. So this is my understanding now, is they've switched to where they're going to do the west side now first. And the reason it's going to take so long is because they're going to do it in phases because they want to continue to play there. And they need to have a pretty high volume of attendance. And remember, part of this project too is, although it's not part of that 150 million, this is my understanding anyway, there still is this mixed-use entertainment hotel complex that's going to come on the east side of the stadium all the way up to Main Street there, right? That sort of empty lot where those people play those little pickup games, right there. Yeah. That and that east side parking lot are going to get eaten up by this other project that's a sort of not technically part of the stadium. So all that's going to be part of it. And originally the idea was they wanted this to all sort of coincide with the 2026 World Cup, but because it's taken some time, it's now not going to be finished. But the World Cup is still the impetus of this all happening, but it's going to finish, a year later, hopefully still taking advantage of what the Hunts believe is going to be this explosion, another explosion in soccer here because of the World Cup. So that article is in line with what we've been saying.
Okay, stop.
Other than some tweaks.
Because you are telling me information that I am telling you have never said on this podcast, which is they're tearing down the existing west side of the stadium, the press box, the club. Yeah. All of that's coming down too, because the only thing you and I have ever talked about is the north and east side of the stadium, at least that I remember. Now, I'm an old man, and my memory isn't what it used to be. But I swear if somebody, especially you, had told me that they were tearing down the west side of the stadium, I would have remembered that.
No, we brought it up in the last couple of weeks, because remember I told you there was this minor delay. Do you remember me saying that?
I remember you saying there was a delay, yes, and that maybe the delay meant they weren't going to start doing the work until the end of the year versus the middle of the season.
That's exactly right. And the reason that delay happened to the end of the season, as I mentioned to you, was because they changed the order and they're going to knock down the west side first. We talked about this like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I'm going to have to go back and listen to the podcast because I swear if you had said west side, either it completely went in one ear and out the other, I would have that was all news to me. Well, that would explain the amount of time and the amount of money is that they're tearing down all three sides that are not the Hall of Fame.
Right, and we even talked about the idea that they'd have to come up with some kind of temporary media and like television situation for broadcasting. All that kind of stuff is a part of that. I don't remember
any of this. No, we talked about this on the podcast.
Man. Yeah, we did. We did.
Are you sure I was here?
Yeah. Well,
okay, I'm going to trust the curious. I'm going to trust the curious to report back and go, yeah, Peter, you guys have talked about this because I have never heard, or at least I do not recall the idea. I'm excited by the news, but I am confused as to why they wouldn't just relocate the team for a couple of seasons because that is going to be an epic cluster F. Yeah,
that's a question I cannot answer for you. I do not know why they're not doing that. Other than they feel contractually obligated or morally or emotionally obligated to continue to play there. I don't know. They really feel like, my understanding, they really feel like, is this going to happen in stages and it's going to be the better way to go about it. So
whole whole south side construction was such a beating. And so I guess what they're going to do is they're just going to do it in 3 stages. They'll do west, the north, and east or something like that.
Yeah, it'll be west and then northeast combo is going to be my understanding. This goes back all the way, Peter. Do you remember there was a survey for the season ticket holders? Man, I think it was like 3 years ago where they talked about this idea of like, would you be willing to lock in your price for like a couple of years because they knew this construction was coming, right? So they've been planning for this for years. This is not... Yeah, you don't get to this phase right here over like a month. This has been coming since like a year before they earned the World Cup. The Hunts have been planning this. This is not a new. It's so far along that they're into the phase where they've hired the engineering firms and like the construction firms that are in the pre-planning stages for like how you get, all these phases done, and that's what caused the shift of phases, I think, was trying to figure out how to get
Yeah.
it done with people still coming to games and stuff. So
Well, they are.
the general idea that I will throw out there for you, my understanding is they want the whole stadium to be as nice as the Hall of Fame end is, and it's going to include, I believe, upgrading seating everywhere. I say upgrading, replacing. Maybe it's going to be better, maybe it's not. But, all that, all the way around, and the stage is going to have seating again on it, I understand. So, lots of cool things are going to happen.
You want to hear something ridiculous? Am I
Sure.
doing my math right? If that is, in fact, the timing, the Hall of Fame end of the stadium, when the rest of the stadium is reconstructed,
Yeah.
will be 10 years old? 9 years old?
Oh, I can't for the life of me remember when the Hall of Fame
It was
came in, to be
2018,
honest with
wasn't
you.
it?
I have no
2018,
idea.
2019, I think it was. It was before COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, COVID was 20.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be 8 or 9 years old already by the time the rest of the stadium is done.
I know. It's crazy.
Well, it's exciting. I can't wait to see the drawings. I am completely I'm either embarrassed or blown away to find out here that the west side is coming down. I am.
You just don't listen to me, Peter. That's all.
Huh?
You just see.
Yeah.
You
What?
said you don't listen to me.
What?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Yeah.
Well, that's a big deal. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to do that. That is going to be a beating of the highest order because there's going to be at least one entire season where the only seats are going to be the seats on the east side in the baking sun.
I don't know. I mean, how can you do that? That's the thing. It's like, doesn't it have to happen where you can sit there while they're? I don't know, man. Honestly, I don't know how they're going to do it.
No, well, they're just going to. I think they're going to have to shut half the stadium down.
12,000 attendance, 15.
Yeah, they'll go back to.
I have no idea. This is why I wish they would talk about it, because like at some point we're left trying to guess how they're going to do it with things like this. Like, how do they do that?
Well, here's the thing: if the city of Dallas was willing to pony up the dollars to get a USL team to play at the Cotton Bowl, could you imagine how much they'd fumble over themselves to get the MLS team to come play down out there on?
Yeah, we talked about this. They probably called. I'm sure they did.
The city or Dallas?
City.
The Hunts.
The mayor probably called. The mayor probably called the Hunts.
Yeah.
This mayor is all in on being the sports mayor. Like, he's trying to bring all these teams back. I'm sure he called FC Dallas.
Yeah.
He's trying to make himself the sports guy. So, independent of his politics, I just, that he stood up and said that at the Dallas Trinity thing, and he mentioned trying to bring other teams back. And I was like, who else are you talking about? Because the Rangers had never been there. Does he mean the Cowboys? Does he mean FC Dallas? So I'm sure he called the Hunts.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he did too.
Yeah.
But they've only got one.
They're pretty happy with Frisco.
Yeah, well, they've only got one place to put them, and that's the Cotton Bowl. And I can see why there's probably some sort of obligation with all the businesses and everything that are there, around the stadium that are all dependent on game day revenue and all that stuff that would dry up if they weren't to do it.
I think you're right when you said there is a money way that you could get out of Frisco, but I think that it would be so much that's not how the Hunts play.
Yeah.
They're not the kind of people that are going to be like, you know what, it's worth $500 million for me to get out of the Naperville and go back to the Chicago Bears stadium.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
All right. Well, I guess they'll get around to telling the rest of us what the plan is at some point.
I
in the
hope
near
so
future.
soon,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I mean, if they're going to start knocking the building down in this winter, they better tell us something, I would think.
Yeah. Well,
not that they listen to this podcast, but.
All right. Well, Minnesota this weekend. We'll see how it all plays out. Anything else we need to get into? Oh,
yeah, I gotta pay off my Nolan Norris promise from last week.
Oh, what is that?
Well, last week I mentioned in passing that I learned what club it was that came in and made an offer for him that made Dallas jump and give him a homegrown deal. And that club, and since I promised I would tell everybody, is Mönchengladbach. It was Gladbach that came in and made him an offer, and he turned them down to sign with FC Dallas. He's
Do you know what kind of offer it was?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But he's very much a Dallas to the die kid,
Yeah.
It would have been a good fit for him. Not that I think this was a good fit for him too. Theoretically, this coach isn't quite 100% dialed in him yet, but I think it's still going to be fine.
Maybe Lucene will start him.
Yeah. Or Quill, or whoever it's going to be, or maybe it'll still be Coach Nico since all the players like him.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and Dallas Trinity has started signing players. They signed, I can't remember her last name, Brooks, I think is her last name, that had played with the national team. But they've now announced since then 2 players that are from the Dallas area. One's from Prosper and one is from Salina.
Yeah, Haley Davidson played for FC Dallas. And the young lady today, I haven't wrote the article up yet.
Haley Berg.
Yeah. Yep. So these are the kinds of signings we're respecting. I haven't written up the most recent one today, but it'll continue this way. Every couple of days, probably they'll announce another player. I'm sure they've had practices with lots of bodies running out there, and they're trying to nail down all the pieces.
They don't, and they still haven't announced the coach. They don't have much time left.
Yeah, I'm really surprised they haven't announced the coach. Quite frankly, they must have had something go south in terms of what they were doing. This is just pure speculation on my part because they had the TD and they had 1 or 2 of these players that I didn't recognize them until I saw pictures later. Were at the unveiling, so it's not like they shouldn't be a surprise. The people that I saw, I saw some people there that were from SMU or from North Texas, but it's like, I don't know, are those guys there just to be there because it's a big soccer event, or they're somehow involved? You're guessing when you see people. And I saw Brooks and I didn't recognize her. She's not enough of a national teamer that I was like, oh, I know who that person is, but.
And what's the rule about they have to have so many high school players, or?
Well, they don't have to, but they have on their roster. They have the ability to carry 5 amateur players at a time on their roster, on their game day roster, and they can. It's basically the same rule that the MLS Next Pro or USL have, where you can have amateur players from academies playing on amateur contracts and not lose their eligibility. A college player cannot. A college player can't play in this league. But you can have a high school player, an academy player, and you can have professionals. And those are the 2 things in between. A college player will lose their eligibility. And I specifically asked, because when they said amateur, I was like, oh, well, the college players just said no. Their owner did. He was like, no, that will lose eligibility. It's high school kids, academy kids that we can have.
All right.
And quite frankly, some of the very best academy players in here are plenty good enough to play in this league.
Oh, yeah.
No
doubt about it. Oh, by the way, did you see Lily Johannes for the national team last night? Have you?
I did not see it. I saw the clips of it, not the clips, but the people talking about her. So it must have been really something.
Go look at my Twitter timeline and go watch the highlight video, her touch video. Dude, Buzz, the way she receives the ball and passes it.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Is so unlike a 16-year-old kid. I mean, the goal is a simple tap in. It's not. I mean, the goal is nothing great other than the fact that she's there and does it at the age of 16. But go watch the pass that she makes about 4 clips into the highlight reel, where she's standing at midfield and she drops an absolute dime into the deep corner of the box to the onrushing right back. It's so sweet. As she is, I'd never seen her play before, and I was immediately enraptured with her game, and I hope she's on the Olympic roster team. So, good stuff.
A quick shout-out to Carl Sante, who got called up to Haiti, and North Texas's captain, Nico Gordon's with Montserrat. So, congrats to those guys on those calls.
Is Sante the only FC Dallas player that has been called up during this international window?
Yeah, as far as I know. Well, Nolan's with the U20 team.
Oh, okay.
That's right. Which is getting ready for the U20 CONCACAF championships.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Dallas-related players, congratulations to Tanner Tessman, who, along with Busio, have gotten Venezia promoted back to Serie A, and has now joined the Olympic team. Watch this dude's career getting ready to rocket. That's whether or not he's playing for Venezia next season is a really interesting story to keep an eye on for the next few months, because I know there are other teams out looking for him. But man, living in Venice, playing in Serie A, it's going to have to be a pretty sweet effing deal to want to take a guy away from being a hardline starter for a Serie A club.
There were definitely Serie A clubs that were monitoring him this whole season. Like, okay, can we get him? But now that they've come up, they might not be able to get him. So,
and we also have forgot. I'm just starting to. I don't think we've officially announced that the word did come out that Julian Eyestone's destination club has been revealed.
Oh, Brentford. Did we not talk about that?
We have not talked about that. No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's one of those things that I've known since December and couldn't talk about it. Here's the thing. Dallas could have had him. For a year and a half, he would have signed. he was ready to sign, and they basically slow walked him, till he went to Duke. And then, once he came out of Duke, they slow walked him again, and they waited too long. And Brentford came in with this offer that just blew FC Dallas's offer away. And on top of that, their system and the offer and where they want to put him in their hierarchy and how much they want to invest in him. Like, they came in and they had a meeting with him where they brought in tape of his appearances with North Texas and showed him tape of himself. And like, here's what we like in your game that we think fits us. Here's a couple weaknesses we're going to fix. They had a whole scouting breakdown package of him from his MLS Next Pro play and his academy game play.
Yeah,
it's just unbelievable how thorough those guys are and how much they just annihilated anything FC Dallas could do. And it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, Brentford is one of the best run clubs in the Premier League, and he's not going to be playing for their U19s or an academy team. They don't have an academy. Well, they do again. They got rid of their academy and restarted. He's going to be playing on their B team.
Yeah, effectively the U23/B team, whatever, reserve team, their second team.
So, in theory, he's like fifth in line for.
Oh, I think it's even less than that.
Oh, is it really?
Players come and go. I think it's going to be less than that from him to the starting. But it depends on, of course, what they do in the markets and all that kind of stuff. You never know for real. But
exciting stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they're really high on him, so he's obviously quite stoked. So
yeah,
exciting for him.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I can imagine.
No, I can't. I can't imagine.
No, can't imagine being that good.
Third Degree the Podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com. Soccer90.com is your source for all the international club gear, national team gear you could possibly want. Soccer stuff. They got everything you can need over there. Use the code Third Degree at checkout for 20% off, both in-store or online. Just mention at the counter that you Third Degree sent you, or use code Third Degree 3RDDEGRDE at checkout at Soccer90.com for 20% off. Some exclusions may apply. Third Degree the Podcast is also brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm. For wills, trusts, probates, and business law, call 469-515-2559 or visit LindstromLawFirm.com for a free consultation.
All right, very good. Well, I'm sorry Dan had to jet. I hope everything's okay with him.
Yeah, he didn't say. I asked him if he was all right, but he hadn't answered, so I really do hope he's okay. Obviously, Dan, hopefully nothing's going on.
Well,
so.
I'm sure it's just a work thing. That seems to suck up most of Dan's time.
That kid's getting destroyed these days. Trying to start his own company is not helping.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, thanks, Buzz. It was good visiting with you, and we'll see how this weekend goes for the old burn. And thank you, FC Dallas Curious Fan. We will be back and talk to you again on another and future episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Damn, where'd you go?
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.